A simple hotel stay turned into a nightmare when a hidden camera was discovered behind the mirror of room 309. But the most terrifying truth wasn't the camera itself. It was the secret hidden behind the wall that no one had noticed for years. The rain was so loud that night, it felt like it was trying to drown out every other sound in the world. Sara didn't plan to stop there. She had been driving for hours, her eyes growing heavier with each passing mile, when the old hotel sign flickered in the distance. It stood alone beside the empty road, its dim light barely cutting through the storm. She told herself it was just for one night, just a place to sleep. The building looked older up close. The paint was fading, and a few of the windows were dark. Inside, the lobby was quiet and smelled faintly of dust and polish. A single man stood behind the front desk. He didn't smile. He simply handed her the key to room 309 and watched as she walked away. As she climbed the narrow staircase, the floor creaked under her steps. The hallway was long and dimly lit. For a moment, she felt like she was the only person in the entire building. The room itself seemed normal at first. A bed, a chair, a small table, and a large mirror fixed on the wall across from where she would sleep. Sara placed her bag down and locked the door behind her. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence. But something about the room didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it. The air felt heavy, almost like someone had just left moments before she arrived. She turned slowly, her eyes stopping at the mirror. It was larger than most hotel mirrors, stretching from the wall almost to the edge of the ceiling. The surface looked clean, but darker than it should have been. When she stood in front of it, her reflection felt distant, cold. She tried to ignore the strange feeling and began getting ready for bed. As she brushed her hair, she kept glancing at the mirror. It was just a reflection, just glass. But every time she looked, a chill ran down her back as if someone on the other side was watching her every move. She laughed nervously and turned away, telling herself she was just tired. Later, as she lay in bed, the room was completely dark except for the faint light from the street outside. The rain had slowed. The silence grew deeper. And then she heard it. A soft, quick clicking sound. It came from somewhere near the mirror. The sound came again, just as she was about to fall asleep. Click. Sara's eyes opened instantly. She stayed completely still, listening carefully. The room was dark, and the rain outside had almost stopped. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then she heard it again, a faint, sharp clicking noise. It seemed to come from the same place each time. The mirror. Her heart began to race. She told herself it could be anything. Maybe the old building was settling. Maybe it was just a pipe behind the wall. But deep down, the sound didn't feel natural. It felt mechanical. Sara turned on the lamp beside the bed. The sudden light made the room feel smaller. Her eyes moved slowly toward the mirror across from her. It looked exactly the same as before, still, silent, reflecting the room back at her. But now, she couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. The next morning, she woke up tired, her mind still stuck on the sound from the night before. The room looked ordinary in daylight, almost harmless. She stood there for a moment, staring at the mirror, trying to convince herself that she had imagined everything. Still, something didn't sit right. She stepped closer and lightly tapped the surface with her fingers. The sound that came back was not what she expected. It wasn't solid, it was hollow. She paused, her chest tightened. Slowly she tapped again, this time a little harder. The same hollow echo came back. It felt wrong. Mirrors placed directly on walls don't usually sound like that. This one felt like there was space behind it. A strange chill moved through her body. Sara turned off the room light and held her phone close to the mirror, using its flashlight. She leaned forward, staring carefully at the glass. At first, she saw only her reflection, but as she moved the light slowly across the surface, something small caught her attention. A tiny black spot in the corner. She leaned in closer, her face only inches away. The spot looked like a pinhole, too small to notice unless you were really looking for it. Her hands began to shake as she reached out and gently pressed against the area around it. The mirror shifted, just a little. Her breath caught in her throat. Carefully, she pushed again. The edge moved enough to show a thin, dark gap behind the glass. Inside that gap, she saw something metallic. A small lens, hidden perfectly in place. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her mind went blank. The truth hit her at once. Someone had been watching. Someone had been recording, and they might still be watching right now. I found a camera in my room. Sarah's voice trembled as she stood at the front desk, staring directly at the man who had handed her the key just hours earlier. The words felt unreal even as she said them. A hidden camera behind the mirror in room 309. For a brief second, something flashed across the manager's face. Surprise, or maybe fear. But it disappeared almost instantly. His expression returned to calm, almost bored. "That's not possible," he replied smoothly. "You must be mistaken." Sara felt anger rising inside her. Mistaken? She had seen the lens with her own eyes. She described the hollow sound, the small black hole, the way the mirror shifted when she touched it. The more she explained, the quieter he became. But he didn't look shocked. He didn't rush upstairs to check. Instead, he leaned back slightly and folded his hands together. "Old buildings have strange wiring," he said. "Sometimes things look different than they are." His tone was steady, but something about it felt rehearsed, controlled. Sarah's stomach tightened. If this was truly a misunderstanding, wouldn't he want to see it immediately? Wouldn't he call maintenance, apologize, offer another room? He did none of that. "I'm calling the police," she said firmly, pulling out her phone. That was when his calm mask cracked. The smile faded from his face, his eyes sharpened. He stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice so it wouldn't carry across the empty lobby. "Maybe that's not necessary," he said quietly. "These things can damage a hotel's reputation. It could just be a misunderstanding. Why not just check out and forget about it?" The air between them felt heavy. Sara suddenly became aware of how alone she was. The lobby was silent, no other guests, no staff, just the two of them. His words weren't loud, they weren't aggressive, but they carried a warning. Leave. Stay quiet. Her heart pounded as she glanced toward the door behind him. For the first time, she wondered how many cameras were in the building, how many people had stood exactly where she was standing, unaware. She tightened her grip on her phone. "If it's a misunderstanding, then you won't mind the police taking a look." For a long moment, neither of them moved, his eyes locked onto hers, cold and calculating. And then slowly, he reached under the counter. What was he about to do? The police arrived quietly, almost as if they too sensed the tension that clung to the hotel. Sara led them upstairs to room 309, her hands still trembling. She watched as two officers approached the mirror, their expressions unreadable, but their movements precise, trained. There was no hesitation, no casual curiosity, only focus. One officer carefully unscrewed the frame. The mirror didn't budge easily. It had been secured with purpose, held tight against the wall for years. When it finally swung forward, the hidden space behind it was exposed, a dark cavity just big enough to conceal something or someone. Sara swallowed hard. What she had feared was real. Inside the gap, they found more than just a lens. Tiny wires snaked along the wall, disappearing into the shadows behind the plaster. Small black boxes, memory cards, and recording devices lay tucked in perfect secrecy, as if waiting patiently for someone to notice. The realization hit Sara like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't a random act of curiosity. This was deliberate, calculated. The officers carefully collected the devices, their hands gloved, their movements methodical. Then they began a full sweep of the hotel. Behind the front desk, in a locked room no guest ever saw, they discovered a small bank of monitors, each one flickering with faint static. It was a control hub, the nerve center for years of secret surveillance. Someone had been watching, recording, cataloging guests for a long time. The shock came when they opened a drawer in the manager's office. Hundreds of memory cards, each labeled meticulously with dates and room numbers, were stacked neatly, like trophies. The scope of the crime was staggering. This was no accident. This was a long-running operation hidden in plain sight. Guests who had stayed here, who had trusted this place, had unknowingly been watched. Sara felt her stomach twist. She thought back to her own stay, the sound of the clicking in the dark, the feeling of being observed. It was worse than she imagined. The camera hadn't just been in her room, it had been part of something far bigger, far more sinister. As the officers continued their search, Sara noticed something odd. Some of the wiring appeared older, different from the recent installation. Someone had started this years before, and the manager had only continued it. A cold realization sank in. If this wasn't the beginning, then who started it? And where did it all truly begin? The manager was taken away in handcuffs, his face unreadable as cameras and memory cards were cataloged and sealed. Sara thought the nightmare was over, that the worst had passed. But even as she left the hotel, a lingering unease gnawed at her. The thought that someone had been watching her so closely, so deliberately, made her skin crawl. Days later, the police called her back. Their tone was cautious, almost hesitant. "We need you to come in," they said. Sara's stomach sank. Something about the phrasing set her on edge. When she arrived, an officer led her to a room filled with monitors and files. They had reviewed the recordings from the hidden cameras. What they found made her heart stop. The camera in room 309, the one she had discovered, had only been installed a week ago. But there were older recordings from that same room, taken from a different angle, years before. Someone else had been operating long before the current manager. The revelation was chilling. The hotel had been a secret observation post for more than one person. Her mind raced. Who had started this? How many people had watched her? Or worse, how many people had unknowingly walked into the lens over the years? The officers looked at her gravely. The previous owner had access to the same system, one said. It seems the manager discovered it when he took over. Instead of reporting it, he continued using it himself. Sara shivered. The room, the mirror, the hollow click she had heard in the night, it was all part of something much larger, a hidden legacy of violation. It wasn't just her room, or even her stay. It was years of secret watching, carefully concealed and meticulously maintained. As she processed this, a detective approached a wall near the mirror in room 309. "This is unusual," he muttered. He tapped lightly, then pressed along a seam she hadn't noticed before. A section of the wall, long sealed, gave way. Behind it was a narrow, dark hallway, untouched by guests or staff. It was impossible to tell how deep it went. Sara felt a cold knot form in her chest. Someone could have been standing there, hidden, observing in silence for hours or even years without anyone ever knowing. The detective shone a flashlight down the passage, the beam flickering across the darkness. Then he stopped. "Whoever started this," he said slowly, "they might still be out there." The thought lingered, heavy and suffocating, and Sara realized, with a chill that ran to her bones, that the story was far from over.
You